Hello to the HubLE audience. My name is Jonathan Gustafson. I'm a postdoc research fellow at Rush University in Chicago, Illinois, and I am also a co-chair of Meet the First Author Committee at HubLE, as well as an editor for the Meeting Reports. And today I'm doing a meeting report for the ORS 2020 in Phoenix here with Oba Akinfosile. Oba, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
We're really excited to have you on board. Can you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell the HubLE world who you are and where you're doing some of your research.
Okay, well, my full name is Oba Akinfosile, but I go by Oba because it's shorter and it's easier.
Okay.
I am a grad student at University of Illinois at Chicago, Rockford campus, and I am doing my research in orthopedic corrosion, particularly in trying to understand cell-saturated corrosion at
Okay.
the modular junction of total hip replacement implants.
Okay, so working specifically with orthopedic implants, that's excellent. Now, in your case, though, you're doing a lot of the cell accelerated corrosion, is that correct? So,
Yes.
so that's an interesting topic, and that's something I think that a lot of people in the HubLE world may not be aware of. So we met at the ORS 2020 in Phoenix. So what
Right.
specifically did you present at ORS?
So the topic that we presented at ORS is cellular serrated corrosion at total hip replacement interphases, understanding cobalt chromium wear particles induce macrophage polarization. And just to give you a quick overview of that, it's basically studies have found that inflammatory cell activity is contributing to the corrosion at the modular junction of total hip replacement implants. And we are trying to understand this specific microphage population. We ran some assays looking at M1 macrophages, which are the pro-inflammatory macrophages, as well as looking at M2 macrophages, which are the anti-inflammatory. And we see that this macrophage population doesn't really fall into either one. So my project is going further and looking at a larger panel of assays, trying to get a clearer and more get a full picture of this population and try to understand exactly what it is and how it's doing what it's doing and the mechanisms involved.
So that's interesting. So when we think of total joint replacements in general, usually there's a lot of metallic components that are involved and they can be articulating in some cases. And so it sounds like you're suggesting is that when these metal components come in contact and they start wearing and these metal particles and debris starts getting generated, that there's a inflammation phase that gets activated by the body, but that there's this recruitment of the macrophages. And what you've shown, or at least what you presented at ORS, and I think what you might be putting in a paper is kind of identifying that the phenotype of those macrophages maybe doesn't necessarily fit into the category of what we stereotypically think of. Does that sound right?
That's exactly what it is. It's not typically what we think of when we think of macrophages. We think of it as black and white. It's either M1 or M2.
Mm.
But according to our findings, there's a whole huge spectrum out there, making it impossible to just limit it to just M1 or M2.
Well, that sounds really novel and very interesting for sure. So, when we think of the big picture implications, can you talk just a little bit about why is this important? So, what happens when these macrophages interact with these metal particles? What usually happens clinically?
So clinically, what we see is that so just to kind of go through the whole mechanism, you have, like you said, you have articulating surfaces, and then we have a release of metal wear particles. And these metal wear particles basically induce an inflammatory response, and the cells take up these wear particles, and these could lead to, so our implants are supposed to have a lifespan of 10 to 15 years.
Hmm.
And because of the corrosion that is happening with the presence of the inflammatory cells, the implant could fail at a much faster rate. And we
Okay.
also see adverse local tissue reaction, such as formation of pseudotumor or necrotic tissue surrounding the implant. And in more severe cases, you can also see like systemic symptoms, which could be neurological, cardiological, thyroid issues. So
Hmm.
it's a whole spectrum of things that could happen as a result of the cells acting and basically moving the weird particles and things of the sort.
Throughout the body. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. So obviously we definitely know that joint replacement surgeries in general overall are pretty successful. We're talking about like 95% success rate more or less, but of the ones that fail, it sounds like this is a major contributor and something that, your group is definitely trying to tackle and understand. So in terms of your career, what's kind of the big next step that you want to take after this presentation at the ORS?
Well, before I came into my master's program, my main thing was I had working on the more clinical side of orthopedics. So going to med school and doing the whole, placing into orthopedics. But after doing the research and looking at this field and learning more about this field and learning how, there's so much more work left to be done. Hopefully, my plan is I graduate in May, finish in May. The plan is to work for a year industry, look at the more industry side of orthopedics, so possibly land a job with DuPay, companies like that, and then also applying for MD PhD programs because I do also want to continue research in the field of orthopedics because it is a very interesting field, and especially with cell accelerated corrosion being something that's more novel to the orthopedic field, it's something that it's exciting. There's so much we don't know yet, and there's so much that we need to know. So I don't want to leave it um, at just my study now. So I would hope to continue it and then apply whatever I learn. So apply I guess, the research part to the clinical aspect as well is
Sure.
the
No,
plan.
that's great. Absolutely. I think those are definitely some good goals. And obviously, we wish you luck as you finish and graduate and kind of secure your next stage for your career. So, thank you again for joining me. I definitely appreciate it. And yeah, we look forward to hearing from your group and hopefully a publication on this cell accelerated corrosion.
Thank you so much,
A-
Jonathan.
All right.